Welcome back to the Golden State with Mates post-game live for the final time this season. Unfortunately, disappointingly, the Warriors fall to a 121-110 defeat to the Minnesota Timberwolves in Game 5 at Target Center on Wednesday night. Look, it's disappointing, no doubt, but it's also the reality that I think we've been ready for here over the last few days. I think ever since the Game 3 loss, the Game 3 one was the one for me where I genuinely think we could have won that game. I thought we played well enough to win that game. Thought some officiating decisions went against us. And from that point on, I was like, geez, it's going to be a real uphill battle. And I went to Social League basketball on Tuesday night. That was after the Game 4 loss, obviously down 3-1, and I got there and I was the third guy there on our team, and the other two guys that were there, one was a Timberwolves fan, or is a Timberwolves fan, and the other is a Mavericks fan. And of course, that was the day that they get the number one pick and they get Cooper Flag. So the fourth guy rocks up, and the first thing he says is, "Oh, I've got two very happy NBA fans here and one very sad NBA fan." And my response was, "No, man, I'm just content. Like, I'm content in knowing that I think this series would have been a lot different had Steph been available." And, I said after that game one that we won that battle, we won the game, but we might have lost the war with Steph getting injured. And that was ultimately the case. And I think it was always going to be the case. You lose your best player. If anyone loses their best player, you're basically cooked, let alone when it's Steph Curry, one of the game's 10 greatest players, you would say, and still one of the game's 10 greatest players right now in present day. And obviously so valuable to the Warriors and the way they play. Like, it's just night and day, obviously. You just simply cannot withstand losing Steph Curry. Like, it's just impossible, and everything that the Warriors do revolves around him. And so that was basically, this is the reality of, what we faced here over the last 4 games without him. And I'll give credit to the guys. I thought they fought pretty hard. They could have easily just meekly given up, I think, in the fourth quarter there and lost by 25. They fought back. They got back within 9 early in the fourth quarter. Pods found a rhythm in the second half, which, at least you finish your season on a positive note from his perspective. He had a team high 28 points. JK had 26 points. In fact, I really had no issue with any of the young guys. Again, it's a playoff environment. Their performances are going to kind of go up and down a little bit. The biggest issue I have, I suppose, particularly with the last 2 games, is like the veteran duo of Draymond and particularly Jimmy Butler. Like, Jimmy offensively, I know things are difficult. I know when there's no spacing out there and he does his best work on the interior and in the mid-range, I know it's very difficult. But still, I think you've got to find a way to be able to have some impact like he did in Game 3. He had 33 points and was excellent in that game. But over the last 2, he took a combined 20 shots over the last 2 games, scored combined 31 points or whatever. It's just not going to get it done. It's not going to get it done without Steph Curry. And Draymond defensively, for him to have really no impact, for the Timberwolves to put up 117, 121 points in the last 2 games. Like, I can understand his offensive production being limited without Steph because of, the chemistry those guys have and the playmaking that he provides for Steph. But for him to have no impact defensively, for him to allow Julius Randle just to continue obliterating the Warriors in this series was really dismal. Like, there were some drives to the rim from Randle, some drives to the rim from other Minnesota players where I think the best version of Draymond, he's not a 7-foot rim protector by any means, but I think that's why he's been so valuable across the course of his career, and why he's one of the best defenders ever is because at 6'6", he can be a really excellent help defender and rim protector at times. And I think I saw one of those in this game where Edwards was on the drive in the second half. Aside from that, way too many times where Randle is primarily Randle is driving on someone else, and Draymond's just sitting there kind of around the paint, but like just watching on, just being an onlooker, letting Julius Randle get to work. And I was just really, really disappointed with Draymond defensively, and pretty disappointed with Jimmy offensively, although I think there's probably a few more excuses there for him in terms of the pelvic contusion, in terms of just the general Warrior offense and the spacing. Apparently he was sick also in Game 4. So I think there's few more excuses for Jimmy offensively than there are Draymond defensively, but I think they're my biggest issue, as much as I'm kind of content and understand that the Warriors probably would have lost anyway, they're probably my biggest issues, I think, over these last two games. And to have the veteran duo, the veteran stars that you needed to rely upon without Steph, for them to be the most disappointing in this situation, I think is really, really not good. Like, I could understand, Pods has obviously been struggling, but I can just understand that a little bit. He's a young player, second year player, hasn't really been in this environment before. And, he stood up in this game. He stood up in the second half. I thought he was really good. Was aggressive in a way that you would have liked to see Jimmy at times. So Kuminga, the exact same. Kuminga wasn't efficient in this game, but at least he was trying to make things happen. So obviously we're going to talk plenty about his future here coming up as a restricted free agent, but there's going to be plenty of time for that as the offseason starts to develop. All right, let's get into some of your comments here, guys, again on this last post-game live of the season. Maybe I'll do a few other playoff games if people are interested, because I'm certainly obviously going to be following on from here. It's very disappointing, don't get me wrong. There is a little bit of, I think you can get a little bit of extra enjoyment maybe out of playoff basketball once your team has been eliminated, if that makes sense. I know that sounds weird, but it's kind of now, all right, well, the season's over. We're just going to have to deal with that. And now I can just try and enjoy the rest of what the season has to offer, which is obviously not too many games left, and want to try and make the most of that. Priscilla says, I just don't understand why Butler isn't aggressive anymore. We had a chance, but that's it. Logan says, Butler isn't him. Says, get Cam Johnson and Melton on this team, trade Kuminga, Pods, and Moody. Yeah, the Kuminga stuff's going to be interesting. The Podziemski stuff, like, I don't know. He obviously finished this game and the season, I suppose, really well. But other than that, obviously wasn't a great playoff campaign for him. He had one good game against the Rockets, one good game here, and that was about it out of 12 playoff games. So look, it's a learning experience for him. As I've been saying, I think we saw today that, he was needed and he needed to step up well before this, obviously. But, the fans that were saying, get Podziemski out, see some minutes from I was going to say Cam Spencer. No, Pat Spencer. Cam Spencer is, of course, his brother. Give Pat Spencer some minutes. Well, we saw a little bit of that early in the second quarter, and the Pat Spencer stuff wasn't great. So I had no issue, like a lot of fans did, with Steve just continuing to ride Pods heavy minutes throughout these playoffs. I think the Warriors needed him, particularly without Steph, and he stepped up a little bit in this game. The biggest thing for me is, like, you can trade him, but I think you'd still want a pretty good return. Like, obviously, if Giannis is available, then Pods is in the deal. Like, that's fine. But I'm very wary of, like, the CBA at the moment and the first and second tax apron. And you've got a guy here in Brandin Podziemski who, even if you don't think he's very good, is at minimum a 20 to 25 minute, like, bench rotation piece for you. At minimum. Like, if you really don't think he's that good, that's at least what you should think of him. So when you've got that type of player making $5-6 million, that's quite valuable. And I think that's the other aspect to this that has got to be included in the conversation, is that it's just not about him as a player. It's the value that he provides on his contract. And, same can be said for a couple of the other guys like Post and TJD. Like, those guys aren't going to be, like, they're not going to be sticking points in a big trade. Like, you send those guys out if you need. But they're also guys that are making like $2 million, and throughout the course of a regular season, they can be helpful for you, and they've still got some potential as young players. So that's kind of the thing we have to remember here. Obviously, it's different for Kuminga, because Kuminga is probably going to need or want a $20+ million per year contract now. So you're going to have a serious discussion and think about that. And then Moody is another one where it's like, well, if you need a mid-tier salary to be moved in order to make a trade happen, then I think he's certainly potentially on the table, as is Buddy Hield, as is, like, everyone should be on the table. I don't think there's anyone aside from Steph that shouldn't be on the table. I think Jimmy's pretty safe unless they get a significant upgrade on him, like a Giannis. Obviously you trade Jimmy for Giannis. Would you do Jimmy for KD? Depending on what else Phoenix needed, maybe. But I don't think, Giannis would be the clear upgrade there. And he's obviously younger than KD. And aside from that, like Draymond, I think Draymond's not safe. Like I just generally like to me, he limits, as good as he is defensively, don't get me wrong, he was disappointing in these two games, but obviously finishing third in defensive player of the year, he had an excellent defensive season, particularly over the second half where the Warriors were the number one defense after the Butler trade. For as good as he is defensively, I still think he really limits the Warriors offensively. Like he's such a non-factor as a scorer. He's such a non-factor in terms of shooting the ball or at least having defenses respect him, that you have to kind of have the perfect running mate, I think, in the front court with him as a center. And the Warriors just haven't been able to find that. Like they just simply haven't. I think Post might, like the absolute best version of Quentin Post would probably be the right player, but whether or not we're ever going to get the best version of him and whether we're going to get it in year two, like I have genuine concerns about that. So I think that ultimately that's probably the area the Warriors have to, if it's not going to be a blockbuster trade, to me, that's the area the Warriors have to most prioritize is the front court, is working out what they're doing with the center rotation because they've got Looney, TJD, and Post, and I have no idea what the hierarchy is between those three guys. Like we saw kind of second half of the season, it was mainly Post, Looney, and TJD, but then all of a sudden TJD started the last 3 games of this series. So it's quite weird. And therefore, like that needs to be figured out. And if the front court needs to be figured out in a way that you have to, like you think about moving Draymond as well and just completely changing things up, then I would be open-minded to that if I was Mark Dunleavy Jr. and the front office. Logan says, got 2 years left with Curry, Jimmy, and Draymond. Do whatever you can to get more shooting. This team needs more shooting. Pods isn't him. Trade Kuminga. I can't even win one game without Steph. Pathetic and unacceptable. Steph has been carrying this franchise. Is it pathetic and unacceptable? That's pretty harsh. Maybe, yeah, like if you want to say that, like that's fine. I'm not sure. It's very disappointing. I just think game 3 was the one that they needed to win. And then even if you took game 3 and lost these last 2, like you're still going back home for a game 6, you might get Steph back and therefore you're still a chance. So in terms of the shooting thing, that's absolutely agree with that. Cam Johnson's name's going to come up. Melton isn't necessarily known as a shooter, but bringing him back, and if he's healthy, obviously, I think we saw in the very limited time at the start of the season that he was really effective as a backcourt teammate for Steph. The pod shooting stuff, like he shot the ball well over the second half of the season. Now, he didn't shoot the ball well in the playoffs, shot the ball pretty well today. You see some signs with him today where you think, okay, and he's not afraid of the moment, and neither's Kuminga, and I think that's a bit of a contrast to me towards, I think Moody at times in these playoffs was a little scared of the moment, lost confidence. The same a little bit with Quentin Post, albeit again a rookie player. I'm not off him entirely, obviously. So it's going to be a wait and see. But more shooting is definitely required, and that's another reason why I think if you need to consider moving Draymond in order to get that more shooting. Because obviously, if you've got Butler and Draymond as 2 of your key pieces playing 30-plus minutes, that means you really have to get shooting at every other position. Like it really does. And if Pods isn't going to be a lights-out shooter, and if Kuminga comes back, then there's a couple more guys who need to play heavy minutes who aren't great shooters either. And then, they weren't really respecting Moody in the playoffs. GP2, we know, isn't going to get respected. So there's just so many guys. Like, can Guy Santos take a step and become a legit shooter and rotation player? Like, I don't know. I don't think you should be necessarily relying on that. So there's a lot of things to talk about and work through if you're the Warriors heading into this offseason. Thanik says that lineup that cut the lead to 9 should have stayed in the rest of the game. Probably agree with that. Also says Dre killed our momentum. Very disappointing last 2 games from Draymond. Priscilla says, I want to see how this team is in a full regular season. And if it isn't good, trade some assets. Kuminga is getting better, but every young asset we have are just too inconsistent. This would have been a good series if Curry wasn't injured. Literally couldn't guard him in the regular season. Yeah, like it's interesting. Like I've heard Timberwolves fans and even the guy I play basketball with who's a Timberwolves fan said that this is kind of what Minnesota do. They play down to their level a little bit, and that if Steph was out there, they would have just played better and maybe still won the series. And I can understand that argument a little bit. It happens in sport, and I think Minnesota fans would preach to you that that's kind of what's been happening over the course of the entire season. And they've had some real bad losses as a result to teams that they should otherwise beat. But I'm still fairly confident that if Steph was available, even if the Warriors aren't winning, this series is going pretty deep and potentially another game 7. And we saw that in game 1. The Warriors had control of that game with Steph on the floor, up double digits, and obviously he went down, and they were still able to pull that game 1 victory out. But obviously a different story over the last 4. Thendex says Dre has to go. It's time. It's worth a conversation, I think, for sure. With the way JK was treated, he will leave too. So probably a sign and trade. Thendex says we need a new coach who doesn't depend on one playing style. Do you think we should have seen Moody earlier? No, Moody was good in the 4th quarter, but I mean, you could argue you should have seen him ahead of Santos. You could argue you should have seen him ahead of Pat Spencer. Fair. I just thought he was really bad in the playoffs, and the only time he generally played well were in these kind of 4th quarter garbage minutes where the team was down 15-20. Like that's just true. Like he had that 25.9 rebound game against the Rockets in game 5 where like the margin was 20 plus, like, and they were down by 30 earlier in the 2nd quarter. So when it really mattered, he didn't have any good performances whatsoever. He was downright dismal, and that's why he found himself out of the rotation. Priscilla says, Kerr said once Curry retires, he retires. The only reason he became coach. Priscilla says, I want to see Wolves versus Knicks, see who benefited more in the trade. Geez, that'd be an interesting final series, wouldn't it? But it's possible, very possible. Thendex says, Game 3 was the one, absolutely. Lucky Jelly says, Jimmy and Draymond played like crap. Maddie says, what can the Warriors get for Kuminga that will make us competitive next year? It's going to be interesting to see. Looks like I think I read a report today or whatever, that Brooklyn don't really want to necessarily just give up their salary cap space for a young player just to let them kind of thrive. Like they want to use it on something genuinely meaningful that could get them back into playoff action. And of course, they've been linked to Giannis already. So we'll wait and see on that one. Cam Johnson's probably the name, though, that if Brooklyn are going to have interest in Kuminga with their cap space, then maybe Cam Johnson is the player. Lucky Jelly says Moody also balled out with Pods. He was good in the 4th quarter. Yeah. FTW Clan says, I'm so sorry, Curry. You had to sit on the bench and could do nothing but watch this team be completely unable to win a single game without you. Yeah, it's rough. Brody says, Golden State Valkyries. Here we go. Yes, season starts. Is it tomorrow? Tomorrow's season? Or Friday? Friday, maybe. I think it's Friday night, isn't it? First home game of the season. Probably tune into that. Lucky Jelly says, I think if Steph Curry never got hurt, I believe we would still be alive. I think we'd be alive. I think the series wouldn't be over in 5. Or maybe it would be, and the Warriors would be moving on to the conference finals. Brody says, honestly thought the Warriors just got exposed for being absolutely absurdly bad without Steph. Part to blame on the system, part that the same system won us 4 chips. Yeah, it's just the reality of the situation. Unfortunately, pretty flawed roster. And again, I'm not putting this on Steve Kerr at all, to be honest. I know some fans will, but I'm not going to be, that's for sure. Empire says, Dre and JK have to get traded if Warriors want another chance next year. Be surprised if both of them are on the team entering next regular season. I would be. And most likely that means Kuminga's gone, but I think there is a slight world in where Kuminga's actually still on the team and Draymond's not. And the only reason I say this is because those guys overlap with positioning. Like you just can't have 2 power forwards making $25 million each, right? 2 power forwards that don't shoot, right? Or don't shoot well. Like neither of them are centers. Well, Draymond, I suppose, has been playing as a center over the second half of the season, but that's just not sustainable to me. So you got to figure that out. And Kuminga doesn't shoot the ball well enough to be a 3 unless you get like a real sniper. And again, the best version of post, maybe that becomes possible. But I don't think you're banking on. You can't go into next season thinking, yeah, our front court is Kuminga, Green, post. Like you can't do that. And then Butler at the 2 and then Steph at the 1 and Pods off the bench. Like that's just too complicated to me. So I think they've got to almost choose between Draymond and Kuminga. And I think most people would say, well, you just pick Draymond, obviously. But there's some offensive limitations there that, again, I think, and maybe there's a chance both are off the team. Like legit both are off the team. So we'll wait and see. Lucky Jelly says, Jimmy Butler passed the ball too much today in last game. And for a lot of games, I think a lot of fans would say he passed the ball for too much at plenty of times throughout these last few months, albeit he's been super impactful. And, really the primary reason the Warriors even got to this spot is in the second round of the playoffs. I mean, he says Kuminga is gone next year, probably Moody gone, more size and offense needed. Pods could be trade bait also. Then next says, what sucks is that I don't even think the Wolves are that good. I hate all the teams left in the West need the Pacers or Knicks to win it. I think the Pacers might be my team that I want to win because I do not know a Pacers fan. I don't know one. And I just think it'd be super random if the Pacers won. It'd be a cool story. So, I don't know. Let them win it, I think. I haven't really thought about too much who I want to see win. Lucky Jelly says the young guys today played with more heart than the old guys, Draymond and Jimmy. Yep. Pirate says Glad Pods played good. Shut up the wannabe Lakers fans. Priscilla says if they get a good trade from Draymond, I wouldn't be surprised if they do it. Draymond wants Curry and Butler to get a ring no matter what. Simon says, what if Ant went down after TJD stepped on his ankle? Well, he did go down for a bit and returned and didn't really seem hampered by it over the last, that happened in game 2 or game 3? Game 2, I think. First half of game 2. Maddie says, I don't think KD wants to come back. I see KD in Houston next year. Possibly. Didn't obviously want to come back mid-season, but by the sounds of it, that was more about him just not wanting to be traded anywhere mid-season. Looks like he'll be dealt in this offseason. Where that's to, we'll wait and see. I think Houston a good shout. Also says QP was poopy tonight. He was he was not impactful throughout the entire playoffs, really. He had a couple of moments where he was okay early in the Rockets series, but the further it went, the less impactful he was, really. Then it says 0-4 without Steph is just pathetic. Like a lot of these players will not be NBA players on other teams. It's a bit harsh, but okay. Empire says, what do you think of Warriors trading for Cam Johnson, AR, Melton, and a center? I really think Austin Reeves would fit good on the Warriors. Austin Reeves. As a backcourt teammate to Steph, that would probably leave Pods out of the mix, I suppose. The Cam Johnson thing makes a lot of sense. The Melton thing makes a lot of sense. The center thing is interesting to me because they need to figure that out, but I think they also need to aim high on that. Like, if they just go out and trade for Vucevic, who's making $20 million and who's a complete liability defensively, I'm just like, I don't really want that at all. A guy like Kelly Olynyk reported again today. I think Michael Scott of Hoops Hype reported that he could be a trade candidate again in the offseason. Like, Kelly Olynyk, fine, nice, valuable role player, but he's not a starting center. And so it's going to be interesting to see what options become available, right? Like, do you look at the corpse of Brook Lopez in free agency and think to yourself, okay, maybe he's got 1 year left in him? I don't know. We'll wait and see. Matty says, why would Kuminga come back? I can't see why even dollars would make him want to sign a contract with the Warriors. The only way he stays is if they fire Kerr. Well, he doesn't get a choice in the matter. He has a choice in terms of he can go out and get an offer sheet from somewhere. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the Warriors, he's a restricted free agent. The Warriors, and this is exactly why they didn't force an extension at the start of the season, is because they knew if this went all the way to restricted free agency, they'd have the right to match any offer sheet that comes in, right? So if Brooklyn come and say, here's 100 mil over 4 years, the Warriors can say, all right, JK, here's 100 million over 4 years, and you got to stay with us, right? So that, to me, I don't think the Warriors are just going to match anything, right? But I'd be surprised if, his play over the last 4 games, I do think increases the chances a little bit. Albeit, I think there's still genuine concerns on how he fits with Steph and Jimmy, both of those guys together, and whether or not he can be any kind of valuable player as a third scoring option when it's pretty clear he needs the ball in his hands to be effective, as he has been over the last few games. So that's a genuine question mark, and therefore, if it is $25 million a year, I can see the Warriors balking at that and saying, okay, we'll then walk or try and execute a sign and trade or something like that. But otherwise, if it's 20 million or less and there's no real sign and trade that brings back something decent, then I can just see them saying, yeah, we're just going to match the offer sheet and you can come back and we'll see how it goes, essentially. So the Warriors still have some leeway here. I do wonder what would happen if Kuminga's just all right, guys, I know you have the ability to match, but I just really don't want you to. Please don't. We've had 4 years here. It hasn't worked. can you please and have his agent, really go at Mike Dunleavy and say, just don't match this, please. Just let him walk, let him get a fresh opportunity. I don't know if that comes into it at all, but again, that's all to play out. Brody says, hey, well, at least this year's conference finals and finals are very interesting. Well, that's the disappointing factor, is that I think if Steph didn't get injured, there's a real way the Warriors could have, one, obviously past the Timberwolves, and then two, potentially come out of the West, and three, potentially won the championship. And that's the wild thing. And I think you got to question whether or not the Warriors are ever going to get this kind of opportunity again. It must be said, when you look at the West is only going to get stronger. The Mavs missed the playoffs, just get Cooper flagged. The Spurs miss the playoffs. They're going to get Wemby back. They're going to get a full season with De'Aaron Fox. Just got the second overall pick. Giannis could be headed west, and unlikely to the Warriors. He could go to San Antonio or Houston or something like that. So are the Warriors ever going to get another opportunity like this in the Steph Curry era? I mean, we have this kind of conversation, I think, every time, over the last few years since the 22 championship. 23, 24, 25, probably had this conversation 3 years in a row where you question whether the Warriors can get back into a position where they can genuinely be in contention for the title. And I actually think they were. I think they were prior to Steph's hamstring injury. Pirate says, I think you keep either Draymond or Kuminga because he needs to start all year. Yeah, I think one of those two guys will stay. One of them will probably go, and maybe there's a slight opportunity if there's a blockbuster trade out there or something that both are on their way out. Empire says the good thing about this loss is that Curry doesn't have to play Game 6. I think if Curry played Game 6, something would have gone wrong with his hamstring. Potentially, who knows if he would have even played. Lucky Jelly says, hey man, to be honest, I'd rather pay Kuminga Draymond's $25 million. Stop protecting Draymond like with Wiggins. We prioritize Draymond over Poole. Interesting. Brody said, ring up Adam Silver and get us Giannis for Draymond and Moody plus the first pick in 2026. That'd be nice, wouldn't it? Who knows? Anything's possible after the Luka trade and after the Mavericks somehow got pick one out of that as well. Dan X says, we need a big and shooters. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you just can't survive. And it's amazing they actually got this far. And I think it's a credit to Steph and Jimmy, in fairness, and the defense of Draymond as well. It's crazy they get this far in 2025 when they legitimately lack shooting outside Steph. And they also lack size. If you lack size and you lack shooting, that's amazing that they got to the second round of the playoffs. And that's actually the reality of the roster. The roster lacks size and lacks shooting, and yet somehow they got to the second round. And I think that just goes to show you, if anything, this should increase Steph's standing, all time, right? The fact he was able to take this roster with this team that's got some fundamental flaws in it to the second round of the playoffs, right? And could have potentially gone a lot further had he not got injured. Like Jelly said, if we still had Poole a different game today, Draymond ain't the same anymore and fouls too much. Yeah, possibly. I don't want to get into revisionist history too much. If somebody gets Giannis, I'll be mad because we need him the most. A lot of teams that need him, to be fair, I think. Then next says, trade JK and Dre to the Wizards for Poole and hopefully involve the Nets for Cam Johnson. I would also like Steven Adams. I think Steven Adams is not a bad shout as a kind of an upgrade for Looney, but what the Warriors have to offer him in free agency is obviously going to be determined on what they do with Kuminga and stuff like that in terms of how much room they have available. Brody says, Austin Reeves just a Poole clone trading for what we already had. Poole clone, but on much less money. What is he on? $13 million for one more year, is it? $13 to $15 million for another year, and then he's going to need a big extension, obviously. Empire says, I'm fine with any center, just please not Nikola Vucevic. Well, he's going to be available again, but it feels like you want someone better than that. It just feels like that's not moving the needle for you. And I also don't know how the Warriors do it salary matching wise. They're going to have Hield and Moody as mid-tier salaries, so maybe it's Hield and Moody and something else slightly for Vucevic, which I'm sure the Bulls at this point would probably do. If they could get a young talent like Moses Moody, they probably would. But then, what does Vucevic do to the Warriors? Okay, it gives them another center option, but it's a liability defensively. You're just giving up. Yes, you're just getting some more shooting at the center spot, but you're giving up probably your second and third best shooters in Hield and Moody. So I don't think that does anything. Like you, Jelly says, I feel like people like KD don't want to be with us because Draymond is a lot to deal with. Earlier when we tried for KD, he turned us down to excuses like, I want to see how the Suns play out the year. Pirate says, Dallas fire sale, AD for JK and Pods. Well, the issue is like they just got the number one pick, but they don't actually have access to really any of their own picks moving forward. And so I don't think they are going to be I don't think there's going to be any kind of fire sale there. I think they're going to be trying to add to what I think they're going to try and get a guard to replace Kyrie, who's going to be out for most of the year. And then Kyrie comes back. And once he does, then you've got Kyrie, AD, you add Cooper Flag, who can hopefully be a helpful winning piece to you straight away. You're going to have Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford. Maybe you trade one of those two guys. Who knows? Like, I think I'm as bad as the trade was, as much as I completely have no idea why Nico Harrison did what he did. I actually think the Mavs have somehow fallen into a reasonable situation here where they can be a legitimate threat to be a deep playoff team, which is obviously what they wanted in the first place with the trade and looking towards the short term. And now they've just suddenly been helped out in the long term as well with Cooper Flag. Some says Draymond needs to go. One-dimensional players are not taking you anywhere in 2026. I would rather develop JK's one-on-one defense, which is already good, and bring in a rim protector. I mean, it says Zion. You could bring in, I mean, by the sounds of it, Zion's not going to be available. But if he was, then you would have to make multiple other moves. So you could not have Zion with Kuminga and Draymond, or even one of them. I think you'd have to have Zion, Kuminga, and Draymond out, both of them. Then you'd have to try and find a shooting big that's probably more proven than Quentin Post. And then maybe you have Steph, Zion, Jimmy, a genuine, legit shooting big, who also is a brim protector. And there's just not many of those guys out and about. Like the best version of Quentin Post, again, maybe, but like that's a long way away from happening, I think. Lopez is on the downside of his career, so he's not really that player anymore. So there's just it feels like the Warriors are probably, unless it's like the Giannis move, right? Where if you went into next season with Steph and Giannis, you probably just feel okay about the season, regardless of what the rest of the roster looks like. Outside of that dream move, feels like the Warriors are maybe a couple of moves away here from really getting back into being a genuine title threat, because again, the West is going to be so much stronger next season. Pirate says the fact the Dubs made it this far just shows how good Curry is and how Curry's top 5 all-time. Spoiled fans drive me nuts. Agree with that. Robbie says crazy that we weren't in the play-in before Jimmy and then made the second round. Yeah, I mean, as disappointing as this is, like, I think we've been treated to some really good basketball from the Warriors over the last few months, and it was certainly an improved product. And sometimes that can be enough. Now, I know as fans, like, we want the team to win the championship every year, right? That's just not realistic. And I think at the end of the day, like, they've been eliminated in the second round, but you got to look back at it and think, was the Jimmy Butler trade worth it? Absolutely it was. Absolutely the Jimmy Butler trade was worth it. And even going into next season with Steph and Jimmy, yes, they're older, obviously, and that's going to be a concern, but you feel better having Steph and Jimmy than if the Warriors had not made the Jimmy Butler trade and had simply let the season play out, finished 11th in the conference. Who knows? Maybe they would have got Cooper Flag or something like that and got a high pick. But I think ultimately the Butler deal was worth it, just to see Steph play in some really high stakes games to win a playoff series against the Rockets. So it was worth it at the end of the day. FTW Clan says the worst part is I feel like the window for a chip this year was actually open given how the East series went. Yep, absolutely. Thanik says, to be fair, considering we were 12th in February, then made the second round is quite a feat. What sucks is the way to a championship just seemed more open with everything happening to other teams. Yep. Next year will be tough, but we go again. It's going to be fun to see Steph and Jimmy for all the games next season. Hope we are around 1 to 6 positions. I mean, the West is just going to be a complete bloodbath again, I think, where you're going to have even more teams in this season, like really competitive. And I don't know, we're just going to, there's no point. There's absolutely no point trying to work out where any team is going to be right now next season. Like, we've got an entire offseason to play out. There are going to be a heap of trades that are going to make a big difference in the league. There's going to be a heap of free agency moves that make a big difference. So I'm not going to sit here and proclaim that the Warriors are going to finish in a specific position next season. I just think that's impossible until we work out what happens in the offseason. Thenix says the only teams that will be bad next year is Suns, Pels, and the Kings. 11 will be competing. The Jazz. I'm not sure, so the Jazz won't be competing, that's for sure. The Suns and the Pels and the Kings, I don't think they're in spots where they can necessarily afford just to throw it in. Like, the Suns don't own their picks. So unless they get their picks back, which maybe they will, because Houston own them and they could, send KD to Houston and get their picks back. And I don't think they're going to trade Booker. So if they still have Booker and they don't have their picks, there's no incentive for them to tank. Like, they should still be trying to compete. And therefore, I still think, I don't know, maybe they work out something with Bradley Beal and he's off the team and that's addition by subtraction. And maybe they get something, reasonable for Durant where it's not necessarily all the future assets. It's just simply something coming back. Like, for example, if the Warriors just said, here's Jimmy Butler and a couple of firsts for KD, right? And therefore, Phoenix could still be competitive somewhat with Booker and Butler and, a couple of other moves in the offseason. So I don't think there's incentive there. I was just putting a hypothetical Butler Durant thing in there. I don't think that's actually going to happen, but that's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't think they're necessarily going to be, tanking at all. The Kings as well, I don't know. It sounds like DeRozan's going to be available. They've still got Sabonis. They've still they're not good, but they're also not in a spot where their roster is that bad that they're just going to be easily tanking. And the Pels dealt with so many injuries this season, but otherwise, I actually think their roster again is okay. If you have CJ McCollum, DeJounte Murray, Zion, obviously there's going to be injuries because those guys are just generally pretty injury prone, particularly Zion. But again, that's enough talent. There's just so much talent in the NBA now that there's very, very few teams that you look at and think you can't compete, right? You are automatically star of the season out of the race. I think there's the Jazz are probably the only team in the conference, right? That would be the case for. And then in the East, there's a few more. Obviously, you'd have Washington, Charlotte, just because they haven't taken a step forever. So it feels like they're just perennially going to be bad. I don't know who else you got. I'm trying to think. I don't even really care about the East. The East just sucks. So anyway, we'll move on from that. Then next is, I think KD and Booker both get traded. Be a big call to trade Booker, I think, just because he's Phoenix grown, obviously, as a guy that's been there his entire career. Empire says, can players like Pat, Knox, Gee, and Key be traded? No, not really, because they're all. Is Santos out of contract? I think Gee might be under contract for another year. But obviously Spencer, Knox, and Key all out of contract now. Thendex says, hopefully this isn't your last stream. Well, I'll be back next season, no doubt. I might be back for Summer League, potentially. We'll wait and see. If you guys are watching on replay or whatever else and you'd like to see some streams after any more of the playoff action, particularly come finals time or something like that, then just let me know and I can certainly do that. Other than that, guys, I might just finish it up. Obviously, disappointing way to end the season, but not a surprising one, unfortunately, following Steph's injury. Thanks to everyone that has commented on this post-game live and that has continued on any game. I don't know how many I got. I must have done at least 60 post-game lives this season. I think I got to most games throughout the regular season, the playoffs. So thanks to everyone that has commented throughout the season and for the ongoing support. It's much appreciated. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel already, that'd be greatly appreciated. Follow me at POC252. That's POK252 on X/Twitter. Of course, I'll have plenty more just general podcast episodes coming up, looking at the Warriors, what the Warriors need to do in the offseason, the latest news and reports, speculation, rumors, whatnot on any player. I think most notably Kuminga is probably going to be the main talking point here over the next few weeks or so. So we'll wait and see what happens there. Jamu says, we got that 41st pick, so let's discuss him in Summer League. I mean, I remember discussing Quentin Post a little bit when he played those, final 2 games of Summer League, I think, last year, which were actually pretty exciting and then turned out to be pretty relevant given he's now become a relevant player for the Warriors in his rookie year. some says, honestly, after such a pathetic finish to the season, I'm rooting for the Pacers to win. Pacers are pretty fun to watch, to be honest. Yeah, I think Indiana might be my team just because I know some Knicks fans. I mean, it'd kind of be cool just to see how crazy New York would be. New York's one of my favorite cities in the world, having been there a couple of times, and one of my favorite cities. And it'd be crazy to watch what just happened. Like the city had just shut down. It'd be crazy. Obviously, OKC. I don't know. Like, I don't really care. I don't really love them at all. I really don't like them at all. So I'm not sure I want them to win. Minnesota, I'm not sure I really like them either. Rudy Gobert getting his hands on a championship would be pretty disgusting, I think. So I think Indiana might be the team I'm going for from here on out. Anyway, thanks again, guys. Much appreciated. And let me know if you want me to do any more post-game lives after any of these playoff games moving forward. But that is a wrap on the Warriors season. And hopefully you can tune in to the next podcast episode. I'll get one out in the next couple of days with a bigger review on the Warriors season and what they need to do in the summer.